So what, Kevin? Why? Why do we care about this? Well, maybe you're excited by this because you like astronomy, but like you look at a periodic table, some of you are chemistry professors, you understand the chemistry of atoms and these things, and that's important. And maybe this is what your students might be saying, like, so what? Well, it turns out they came from somewhere, and we have pictures of it, which is really exciting. But I'm about to switch over, and if you're there with your family, I'm sorry if it's about to get boring, but this is a pretty important thing where I hope that I'm not going to try and get political, but I want to talk about something that is weighing on my mind and maybe weighing on your mind, which is this idea that in the last year, all of this incredible science has been kind of facing a backlash. We're seeing lots of things where we're getting like cuts to science funding. This graph on the bottom right, where you just see how all of this funding is just slowly being eaten away, I argue that's pretty bad. Because the thing that we just saw, what I just showed you, these pictures, that literally just from the last year or two, they are telling us where we came from, giving us an understanding of who we are at our very core, how we were put together. And that only happens because we, as a human society, invest in science and care about science and want to do science and study the universe and the natural world. And people are losing their jobs. And some people are going to Europe, but there's not a lot of jobs in Europe because they've got a bunch of really great European scientists. And I'm saying this because maybe I get a call next year from Danelle being like, hey, do you want to do this? And I say, well, I'm not a scientist anymore. I don't have a job. That is a real possibility because the funding that I depend on is also going to go away. And that's bad. I would argue, maybe you're like, it's okay, we make do. But hopefully you also, because it turns out that this all comes from an idea, which is that we also are in a time when people don't trust science. They don't trust science. We don't trust science morals, apparently. We don't trust scientists. We think that maybe science is something where we have an agenda. I will tell you, I do not make a lot of money. You can look up almost every scientist's salary online and see, and you generally find out that most scientists aren't doing it for the money. I think a couple are, and those are jerks. Most of us, we're doing it because I have a curiosity and passion in my very core, all the way down to the center of me that says, it is exciting that we are seeing things that no one has ever seen before and understanding the universe in a way we've never seen it before. And so this is frustrating. And people ask me, well, how do we get science back into the public eye? And how do we get people to trust science? And it's exciting. I'm talking to science teachers because I think you play an incredible role on the front line of doing this. You are vital. There's a lot of talk in science and in higher education about this leaky STEM pipeline. This idea that we've got all these ninth graders and then, only some of them graduate high school and some of them go to college. And, look at how many at the very end become STEM graduates. But I would argue, especially for primary, secondary school teachers, that all of this stuff down here, this leak, we don't abandon them. Those are the public. And the public then, at some point, they stopped learning about science, maybe after ninth grade, maybe after high school, right? They leaked out into the public and became citizens. And then that means your job as people who are part of the earlier parts of the pipeline is fundamentally important because you dictate the thoughts and ideas about science and about not just the facts of science, but the fundamental belief in science and what science is. It's not a thing where we're trying to get truth, but actually it's a process where we're wrong all the time and we make mistakes and we do it because we're just naturally curious. Curiosity is fundamental. Science is a weird tool we've developed to help understand human curiosity and develop curiosity. And so I'm going to show this again, the origin of the solar system elements, but I'm going to color these a little bit differently. I'm going to name this instead the origin of my scientific knowledge. Where did I get the knowledge I take around as a scientist? And it turns out it wasn't just me doing research. In fact, it started with primary school, studying hydrogen and helium, which, the bulk of everything that I know and the way that I interact with the world, the numbers. I remember my math teachers doing times table exercises, and I thank goodness because I have to do that type of simple math all the time, right? I remember the first time seeing a periodic table. I remember the first time learning these sorts of ideas about how the universe works and the solar system. The books that I read as a child, the science books, also impacted that. But then my secondary school education essentially just opened up everything. If I had a curiosity that my primary school education helped form, it was secondary school. It was the teachers that I have that I can name: Mr. McFan, Miss DeBow, Miss Lingle, like these teachers that I can name in my elementary through like and mostly in high school, who essentially took me and said, you know what, you have a curiosity. Let me show you some cool tools. Let me show you physics. Let me show you chemistry. Let me. You're going to dissect an earthworm and it's going to feel real weird, but like at the very end of this, you're going to understand about how things are put together and the insides of creatures through evolution, right? And then we go on. Yes, a big chunk of what I learned came from my college education and also from my graduate school education as well. And then there's things throughout that also my research experience is filled with. But look at this. This is a diagram that shows, and I truly believe this, that a huge foundation came from the work of science teachers. And so my end thing right now is that we are in a period where it's actually fairly scary for science in this country. And what that means is, and maybe you wish that other people besides scientists, maybe people who paid your paychecks or whatever, thought about this, but I believe that your job matters more than ever. If we are going to combat an ascientific, like a walking into the darkness where we're like, misinformation is everywhere, and think about critical thinking skills, think about science ideas, and think about science not as like here's one way of thinking about it, but rather here's a way where we should think about it because it is the best way we've ever learned to think about things. As opposed to just like, well, I read it, or, oh, ChatGPT told me, so I guess it's true. But rather, oh, you know what? A bunch of pretty smart folks thought about it, were wrong about it for a little while, and then got new ideas about it. That seems to me to be a lot better way of looking at things that I want to trust in than, well, one person who's put in power says it's the case because they had a hunch or they heard someone tell them this is what happened with them. So your job as science teacher matters more than ever.